Well, this is a wonderful time of year. God blessed us with a gorgeous weekend to honor veterans, brave warriors who have battled evil to keep us free. America celebrated Thanksgiving, gathering family together around the table for a traditional feast. Now, even as we scurry into shops trying to keep Jack Frost from nipping at our noses, there's a palpable warmth in the smiles of passersby as the birth of Christ draws near. It truly is a wonderful time of year. Well, it would be wonderful if we didn't click on the news. For when we see what's happening in DC, Tel Aviv, and at our southern border, it no longer feels like the season of hope. We're sick of it, all of it. Sick of Bidenomics' high interest rates, record inflation, and brutal gas prices. Sick of what's happening overseas, where gentle innocents die and moral threats rise. Sick of sex traffickers who prey on women and children. Sick of corrupt New York and New Jersey Democrats taking bribes from foreign regimes, allegedly. And we're disgusted. As a mom, I'm disgusted by woke schools' preference for critical race theory over basic academic skills. Thankfully, we have yet our champions, courageous leaders who stand for what's right and defend traditional values. And one joins us today. Now, I'm not going to read his long, impressive resume. Just know that the wise voters of Oklahoma sent this man, a strong Christian, an ordained minister, and the son of a librarian, to fight for us in Washington, where he's consistently expressed conservative principles. Ladies, please welcome Senator James Lankford.
That is exceptionally kind of you. Thank you so much. That's a very kind introduction and wrap up of what's actually happening right now. And I would like to request that Apollonia prays for me every day, because that would be fantastic to be able to have that kind of prayer covering every day. So I appreciate that. Let me give you just a couple of quick updates on it. I do remind people a lot that the problems that we face as a nation, none of them are bigger than God. And there seems to be this time where we just rise up and say, there's all these big issues. It's out of control. It's flying out of control. I do believe in a God of order, and I believe in a God of sovereignty, and who is working out his plan and his purposes, both in us as believers and in our nation as well. And so even when we see challenges and difficulties and all the things that are exceptionally real that we face, I do encourage us not to lose hope, nor lose faith, nor continue to be able to just gripe rather than work. I quietly tell the folks at home in Oklahoma, we should be better at praying and working than we are at whining. We find ourselves whining about the problems and not praying and working for the problems. So let's pray and work more than we whine. That should be a basic principle on it, though there's plenty to whine about. We've got a full load to be able to pray over at this point. Let me just give you a quick update of some of the things that are happening in the Senate right now. We just came back in from Thanksgiving time period. We've got 3 weeks of scheduled session, but quite frankly, we'll stay in session as long as it takes through the end of the year. But we've got quite a few things that are stacked up here. A lot of the conversation right now is on what they're calling the supplemental. President Biden requested funding for Israel, for Ukraine, for Taiwan, and then he also requested additional funding for the border. Our response on that was more money at the border is going to make zero difference. More money at the border will actually just facilitate more people coming across faster. What it really takes at the border is to be able to have a change in policy. And so what we've stepped up and said is we will not move on any kind of funding related to this until we actually have a change in policy at the border. And so this has been the ongoing battle that's happened. I've been neck deep in the middle of it all the way through Thanksgiving. I took Thanksgiving Day off itself. But the rest of last week, I was on the phone back and forth hours and hours and hours working through these conversations with people to be able to talk through and to say there's some very basic things. Even the administration will quietly admit the asylum is out of control. We have people that don't qualify for asylum that are just being released into the country. They're not going to show up at their hearings. And if they do show up at their hearings, they don't qualify, but no one actually deports them. So just day after day after day, we have millions of people coming in from all over the world that are being released into our country with a pretend that it's asylum when everyone knows it's not actually asylum, it's economic opportunity. So what we've said is we've got to reform asylum. We've got to actually detain people at the border to be able to do their hearing, not do catch and release into the country. And we've got to be able to have people that qualify for asylum, which, by the way, is a very small number. Those folks get through and everyone else gets turned back around. This is not hard on it. If I go back to ancient history, long time ago, 2010, if you go to 2010, we had 21,000 people a year that requested asylum at our southern border. 21,000 people a year in 2010. That is now every 3 days. Now, every 3 days, what was a year in 2010. So while there is this focus to say it's just flying out of control and there's no way to be able to manage it, I think we did in 2010. And by the way, if you remember, that was during the Obama administration. So it's not like I'm picking a crazy year here. That what it can be done, should be done. We're going to work to be able to get that back. And we said we're not going to move anything on a supplemental until we get a change in policy on how we're actually handling border security. Americans are tired of having an open border that's unmanaged. There's also a next big piece that's out there called the National Defense Authorization. This is a bill that historically used to pass in September, sometimes in July, where there was wide agreement on what we're going to do on our policy dealing with national defense. It is now the last 3 weeks of the year, and Senator Schumer has not even brought it up to the floor. It's currently in a conference between the House and the Senate to be able to work out different differences there. That needs to be able to come to the floor immediately to be able to have something that we address. This is our national policy for how we're going to handle defense. This is pay raises for our members of the military. This is all those individual policies that are there that are incredibly important. So right now, we've got negotiators from the House, Senate, Republicans, Democrats that are meeting to be able to work out final differences. But the push is to be able to not only get this right, but to be able to get it to the floor so this does not lapse towards the end of the year. The funding issues are actually pushed till early next year now into January, but that doesn't mean they're unaddressed. There's a lot of ongoing conversations about appropriation. Republicans have been very clear on this. There are 12 appropriation bills. We want to bring those appropriation bills to the floor, have debate, have transparency, not have a big omnibus bill where all 12 of them come at one time with no debate, no transparency. It's literally a 2,000-page bill that no one has read, to be able to bring that forward and to be able to have a vote on it. It's not unreasonable to say when it's $1.5 trillion, we should have the opportunity to be able to have transparency, amendments, to be able to go after parts that are pork and waste and to be able to vote those out and to be able to have the back and forth that is required in a bill like this. So that's a big piece that we're trying to be able to work through the process on right now as well. That will tick into January. But let me tell you another piece of this. Republicans have been very clear on this. We want to end government shutdowns. Republicans are not trying to create government shutdowns. We want to end them. We have a bill that actually I was the author on that's called Preventing Government Shutdowns. It's a pretty straightforward bill. It does what it says. You get to the end of the fiscal year. If you haven't resolved all the issues on negotiations for appropriations, government stays open at last year's spending level, but members of Congress and our staff can't travel. You can't bring up any other bill but the appropriation bills, and we're in session 7 days a week. As simple as I can make it, when my older brother and I got into arguments growing up, my mom would send both of us to one of our rooms and would say, you guys fight this out, and when you're done, then you can come back out. But the rest of the family shouldn't be affected by y'all's fight. Y'all go solve this somewhere else. That's what we're trying to do on this bill, as silly as it sounds. If Congress has a fight, why are all the American people being hurt by this? Members of Congress should be locked in the building 7 days a week, can't move to anything else but appropriations. We stay arguing this because there are big issues. Debt and deficit is a big issue. We should continue the debate until we actually get to resolution. And if you want to go home for a weekend, if you want to go see your family, if you want to do something else, great, solve this problem. And until you solve this problem, everybody's stuck in DC working on this problem until we actually solve it. It's pretty straightforward. If I can say it another way, it is as simple as if you don't finish your classwork, you have to stay after school till you finish your classwork. Pretty straightforward on it. So that's a bill that we are united on as Republicans. We've actually had a handful of Democrats that have joined us on it, and we're pushing to be able to get final resolution on this so we never have a government shutdown ever again. But we also stay and debate the hard issues. Let me mention one other thing on government shutdowns. I have some folks that say government shutdowns are a way to be able to have a fight or to be able to show we're fighting. Let me give you a real life example. Catherine, you mentioned Veterans Day. That was just a few weeks ago now. It was a fantastic holiday. I spent Veterans Day in the Horn of Africa. I left out from voting on Thursday. I flew to the Horn of Africa and spent Veterans Day in Djibouti. No one has ever vacationed in Djibouti. Let me just say that. I'm 15 miles from Yemen in a pretty tough area. There are 800 Oklahomans from the Oklahoma National Guard that are serving 10 months in Djibouti doing a very important national security mission that's actually there. They border with Somalia. They're dealing with Al Shabaab, a terrorist organization that is fast on the rise in the Horn of Africa. They have a very difficult mission, and they're very far from home for 10 months. I spent that time with them during Veterans Day, eating all their meals with them, spending time with them to be able to catch up on how they're doing, looking forward to them coming back to Oklahoma, which is clearly the promised land, for them coming back to Oklahoma in February. Here's an interesting thing dealing with government shutdowns that I heard. I sat down with some of the folks that do the supply stuff. I was just sitting down with different folks, eating meals with different people and getting a chance to be able to chat and check on them and their families. And I said to three of the soldiers over there, what do you do? And they said, well, we do the supply ordering. We manage all the, what we're going to do on different things. And in my generation, I can say this, some of you know what I'm talking about. I immediately thought, I'm sitting with Radar O'Reilly right now is who I'm sitting with. And so we were just chit-chatting and going back and forth on it. And I said, is there any challenges you've got, anything that I need to know? And they said, well, yeah, right now we're not able to order Gatorade. We're just doing water and just doing some basic supplies that we've been restricted on doing some different drinks like Gatorade. And a lot of folks like it. By the way, it's really hot in Djibouti year round. So I visited with some of the leadership there and I said, why are they being limited on ordering Gatorade? And they said, well, there's a potential government shutdown that's next week. And the Pentagon has pulled back all of our spending to make sure that if there's a government shutdown, that we're limited in that. I also had one of the soldiers that's there that asked me later and said, hey, is there going to be a government shutdown next week? I'm talking to my family back home because if there's a shutdown, I won't get a paycheck next week. And we're talking about how to be able to handle the rent and everything else. And all I could think was, I want the folks that are in Djibouti that are protecting our nation to actually get Gatorade to drink as well as water. And I don't want them calling their family and saying, if you can't pay the rent next week, here's some ideas of what to be able to do. Government shutdowns sound like a glorious fight. I want to stop shutdowns, but have the real fight over debt and deficit. And that's what we're trying to be able to bring to the battle right now, to be able to actually confront that. So there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. I literally just walked out of some conversations on border security and some of the things that need to be done in the days ahead. But I would tell you, as you see the news, you should know that there's some people that are actually fighting the fight on this. I know we have a Democrat president. We're keenly aware of that. We have a Democrat Senate. We're keenly aware of that. And we have a very divided House. We're all keenly aware of that. But I believe we can continue to push policies that actually make financial sense for our economy, that bring down the price of gasoline, that actually give us greater freedom, that actually give us some hope and opportunity for the future. We're continuing to be able to push those common sense policies and to say, prove to me that it's not a good thing to end government shutdowns. Prove to me it's not a good thing to be able to not secure the border. Do you really want to be the party about illegal immigration, and that's what you want to be known for? Or do you want to be known for a lawful nation? If you want to be known for crime and illegality, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to be where the American people are, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, then let's actually secure our border. So those are some basic principles that we're working through right now on it. I've got a little bit of time. I want to stop, and because there's a lot of nice folks that it looks like on there. I'd be glad to be able to take some questions or thoughts that y'all may have on it that I can get a chance to be able to jump in on. It's great to be able to meet y'all, by the way.
Thank you so much. And I will say, here at the Federation, we understand that, yeah, we've got a Democrat president at the moment, and yeah, we got a Democrat-led Senate and a divided House. We are here determined to help hold the House, seize the Senate, and take back the White House. So we're right there with trying to help for that. Absolutely. Well, could you please tell us a little bit about your background, your story, how you ended up where you are, and how you managed to juggle both your ministry and a life of politics? How does that work?
I'm a little bit of an odd duck in some ways. I'm a youth pastor, and we've had pastors in the background in the House and the Senate, but as far as I can tell in our nation's history, we've never had a youth pastor. I am 22 years in youth ministry. I used to direct the largest camp in America. It was a youth camp called Falls Creek. Falls Creek has 51,000 students a summer that come to the camp. It's a remarkable place to be able to do ministry. We saw regularly 2,000 students a summer that would come to Christ. It was a really amazing place to be able to serve. And for my family, we loved doing that, thought we were going to do that the rest of our life. And in 2009, God completely interrupted our life and called my wife and I separately. And it's a long story, but we both sensed a call to be able to run for Congress. And we finally admitted it to each other. You've got to know I'm neck deep in ministry and reaching out to families and getting a chance to be able to serve communities and tell people about how great the forgiveness of Jesus is. And when God called us to be able to do this, it was truly out of the blue. We spent 7 months saying to God, this is a crazy idea. And he spent 7 months quietly saying, come follow me. So in September of 2009, I resigned my position at the camp, spent the next year living off our life savings, which you can imagine as a youth pastor was substantial. And we lived off our life savings for the next year. One open seat that was in central Oklahoma for the House of Representatives in the primary, won by 1%, went to a runoff, won that by 30%, and then went to a general election and won that by 35% that November. Served in the House 2 years, and then my predecessor's name is Dr. Tom Coburn, which was he was a remarkable leader in the nation in the Senate. He resigned 2 years early from the Senate because of his cancer treatments, which caused a open election in Oklahoma. And that we again prayed about it, felt like we were called to do that, stepped into it. I had to let go of the House seat to be able to run for the Senate seat, was elected in that position as well, obviously, and have now served 9 years in the Senate. By the way, I still preach. In fact, this weekend I'm preaching in Oklahoma. I still have the opportunity to be able to travel and do that. And I remind people all the time that our United States Constitution, specifically in Article 6, it's not just the First Amendment that protects my right to be able to live my faith, but Article 6 of the Constitution specifically protects the rights of elected officials to have no religious test. So for any elected official, whether they are a mayor or whether a United States senator, they're protected in their right to be able to have a faith, live their faith, change their faith, speak out about their faith. So I don't have to stop that. In fact, quite frankly, I have some people at home that say, hey, you used to be a minister, but you're now in a secular position, so you shouldn't talk about that anymore. And I smile at them and say, so you mean I should go Washington and to be someone different in Washington than who I really am? I'm not going to do that. This is who I really am. And so I'm going to continue to be able to live my faith here. I have a Bible study that I help lead with other senators on Tuesday mornings for breakfast. And we gather together and go through scripture one verse at a time and to be able to talk this through so I can maintain that task while I also maintain the legislative role. Quite frankly, as a follower of Christ, I believe whatever you do for the glory of God, and you try to do that with excellence.
Absolutely. And, I know you have a hard stop in about 3 minutes. So I have all these questions that have been submitted in advance, including a question about Israel, because I know you just went over there, but I know I don't dare get you started on that with only 3 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and ask a much shorter question. And that is, Senator, I'm an economist and I hate efficiency. I can't help myself. I'm obsessed with making things more productive. And twice each year, Americans waste a bunch of time resetting clocks. And yes, I know daylight savings has its pros and its cons, but I'm convinced that the stress, confusion, and missed appointments outweigh the benefits. So shouldn't we just lock the clocks and stop doing it?
100% we should lock the clock. Let me make just a lightning statement about Israel. Israel is our ally. We should stand with Israel. Israel was attacked. Those individuals were murdered ruthlessly, and there were hostages taken. And for anyone who stands on the side of Hamas, we should make it very clear what their values are and who they stand with. I want to stand with the side of freedom and democracy and to make that very, very clear on that. As far as locking the clock, I have to tell you a funny story. I was in it was actually another Veterans Day, but a Veterans Day parade about 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, I guess now, because Marco Rubio and I presented this bill several years ago to lock the clock. And people made fun of us saying, that's ridiculous. That's a silly thing to be able to do. I was like, talk to a mom who had little kids and ask them about how important locking the clock is, because the little ones don't just change an hour. Adults may change and fly back and forth. Little ones don't just change. It's a horrible mess for them on that. So let's fix that for all those moms and kids and families on that. And so we presented that. People made fun of us for a few years, and now people are more and more on it. About 6 years ago, I was marching through a very cold Veterans Day parade in Midwest City, Oklahoma, And it's a great community. Was Air Force Base there. It was a gentleman was in his lawn chair watching it with his military cap on. He's deep in his 80s. He gets up from his chair during the parade, walks into the parade route, right in the middle of it, sticks out his hand, shakes my hand, and he says, "Sir, before I die, will you get rid of daylight savings time?" I laughed and said, "Of all the things I thought you were about to say, that one didn't even cross my mind." And he said, "I hate it. I've always hated it. Will you get rid of daylight savings time?" I said, "Sir, I actually have the bill to be able to do that. And yes, we are working on solving that." By the way, we passed that through the Senate last session, and Speaker Pelosi wouldn't even bring it up for debate on the floor, or it would already be gone. But yes, we are actively working. That's a remnant actually left over from World War II when they were trying to save lamp oil, which I think we're doing fine on our lamp oil at this point. That's what that's left over from.
Just on a personal note, I really appreciate it because you go to school and you get blinded for a couple of weeks, and then finally you're through it, and then they reset the clocks, and you go get blinded for a couple more weeks on the way to school. So thanks for that, I appreciate it. But really and truly, in all seriousness, thank you for all that you do for our country. Thank you for going to Israel and going to the Horn of Africa. Thank you for fighting the good fight in the Senate and in DC, for representing God and representing all Americans. So it's been truly an honor having you here today. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks. That's exceptionally kind of you. Thank you to all of you that are staying engaged, continue to be able to pray and work. We have so many folks that have given up on the nation, and I've just said America's worth fighting for. She's a really remarkable nation, and let's continue to be able to speak out. Quite frankly, we forget we are still we the people. As we convince other people, as we engage in our local communities and school boards and city councils, as we engage in those places, we really do move the attitude of the nation. So clearly, all of you are engaged in trying to be able to actually represent the heart and the value of the nation. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for staying engaged. And I am with you. Let's win back the House or the Senate. Let's expand our lead in the House, and let's win back the presidency 100%. Will make a huge difference in the future of the nation. God bless y'all. Thank you for inviting me.